Hello and welcome to Intro to Volunteers.uso.org, the USO's volunteer management system. Today, we are going to be going over a basic overview of Volunteers.uso.org, also known as the VMS. The VMS is the USO's tool for managing our volunteers all across the world. There is one site for both staff and volunteers, and volunteers.uso.org works with all browsers. In addition, we also have the USO Volunteer Community app available for download on smartphones. Today, we are going to be going over an overview of the system, as well as some basic terms that you will use in the VMS every day. We are going to be talking about who is in the VMS, as well as how admins will use the volunteer management system. To begin, let's talk about what we will use the volunteer management system for. First, the VMS is how we at the USO keep track of all 30,000 of our volunteers. It is how we contact our volunteers, and it is where new prospective volunteers complete their online training. The VMS is used to create calendars and fill it with shifts for volunteers to sign up for, and the VMS is also where we track and approve volunteer hours. Finally, the VMS has a resources section that has helpful information about using the VMS as well as other volunteer management needs, such as the USO Volunteer Recognition Corner. To begin, let's talk about some basic terms that you will need to know to navigate around the VMS. First of all, the VMS is the Volunteer Management System, and VMS is how it is commonly referred to. Members are everyone in the VMS, such as volunteers and admins. And a status is how a member is categorized, such as active or inactive. A bubble is the operational hierarchy that includes USO areas and centers. For example, the bubble would be USO Alaska, but the center would be USO Fort Wainwright. A profile is an overview of a member's account. Everyone in the VMS has a profile. The intake path is where a new volunteer is going to complete their training requirements. Member management is the central hub for your administrative needs in the VMS. And positions are volunteer job descriptions, such as center representatives or special events volunteers. Access groups are how different positions are organized in order to contact volunteers or create calendars just for them. A shift is a volunteer opportunity, and a recurring shift is permanent and repeating. A registration tool is used to create calendars and fill it with shifts. And finally, a query is a search function used to find out detailed information about your volunteers and your VMS. To begin, let's take a look at who is in the volunteer management system. First, we have prospective volunteers. Prospective volunteers are new volunteers who have not yet completed their online training, and they cannot sign up for shifts or log hours. To begin, let's take a look at how a prospective volunteer gets in the VMS. First, they are going to go to volunteers.uso.org. Once they go to volunteers.uso.org, they will see a section that says Interested in Volunteering. They can click here for our privacy policy and our volunteer handbook, as well as the option to contact volunteer operations. If a new volunteer is interested in volunteering, they will click Register Here. Here, they will be brought to an interactive map of the United States, or they can search for their center in the search bar. We also have Europe and Pacific centers listed as well. For volunteers interested in volunteering in Southwest Asia, they will go to volunteers.uso/SWA. If you have questions about this, please email vmshelp@uso.org. If a prospective volunteer wants to volunteer, they will click on the red button. Here, they will be brought to the USO volunteer application. Every center has their own application. They will be asked to fill out basic information, such as their name and contact information. And they will also be asked to consent to a felony and background check and disclose any felonies. New volunteers must consent to our privacy policy, as well as being over the age of 18 and consenting to our adult participation waiver. Finally, they will create a username and a password. Once they click Submit, an email will be sent to the email address that they provided that has an activation link. Once they click on that activation link, they will become prospective volunteers. If that activation link expires after 24 hours, or if their email blocks it, you also have the option to go to the application queue in Member Management and manually activate the volunteer. Once a volunteer is in the system, they are then a prospective volunteer who can begin their prospective volunteer training. Here, they will see an intake path, and you can see an example on your screen. There are several steps that they have to complete. There are some steps, such as blue steps, that volunteers must complete on their own, like our introduction videos, and other steps, black steps like Receive USO Staff Welcome, are either not available to the volunteer yet or must be completed by an admin. We'll talk more about how admins can complete these steps when we go over the intake manager. Just remember, by admins going through the intake path and clicking off their volunteer steps, they can help their volunteers get through the intake path quicker and into our centers quicker. The next group of users in the VMS are active volunteers. These are the volunteers who can log in, sign up for shifts, and report hours. Remember, prospective volunteers cannot log hours until they have completed their intake path. We also have inactive volunteers. Inactive volunteers may have moved or PCS, or they could have been inactivated for other reasons, and they cannot log hours or sign up for shifts. As long as a volunteer was not inactivated for disciplinary reasons, they will be able to log in and view the inactivation experience, which gives them the option to run a report of their hours, to request a reactivation at their center, or to request a transfer. If a volunteer in your center wants to volunteer again or wants to be transferred, you will receive an email from Volunteer Operations. Finally, we have admins. Admins are staff members and volunteers who have been given administrative access to manage their Bubbles volunteers. Admins have an admin tab, which volunteers do not have, and they also have access to several helpful resources that are not available to volunteers. So now that we've gone over who is in the VMS, let's talk about how to find our volunteers. There are 3 different ways that you can search for your volunteers. First is the search bar at the top of the home page. Second is the member directory dropdown from the admin tab. And third is the eyeglass anytime that the side menu is available. Let's jump into the VMS to see a live action tutorial of this. First, you should log into your account at volunteers.uso.org. Here you will be brought to your home page. If you want to search for a specific volunteer, you can type their name in here. However, if you want to see a full list, just leave the search bar blank and click Search. Here, you will be brought to a list of all active staff and volunteers in your bubble. If you're looking for someone who is inactive, click Yes under Include Inactive Members. You can use the search bar at the top to search by name, center, position, or even their job title, such as their position description, or their email address. You can save these as defaults as well. You'll see the full list, or you can search for a specific volunteer. Once you find the volunteer who you're looking for, you can click on their name, and you will then be taken to their profile. As we mentioned earlier, every member in the VMS has a profile, and this allows the admin to see detailed information about the volunteer's account. You can see their skills and experiences, their emergency contact information, their military affiliation, their positions, any forms they've submitted, their status, the last time that they viewed the training videos, notes and documents, any upcoming shifts that they have, and you can also see confidential documents and notes. Confidential documents and notes should be used for sensitive information, such as medical information or disciplinary information. You can see a history of any transfers, and you can also see any emails sent or received by the volunteer. Finally, you can see an overview of the hours that they've served. There are two very helpful areas of the member profile as well. Additionally, you can access any of these by clicking on the click links. First, we have the ability to inactivate a volunteer. Under Volunteer Employee Status, click Inactivate Member. You would want to inactivate a member if they've let you know that they've moved or if they're not interested in volunteering anymore. Once you click Inactivate Member, you will be brought to the Inactivation Manager. You can select the reason for the inactivation, the date it's going to be taking effect, the reason for the change, and add any comments. You will then see any shifts that they're going to be removed from, any positions they will be pulled out of, any transfers that will be canceled, and any pending hours that will be approved. If you're satisfied with this information, click Submit. If they have a lot of shifts they're being removed from, it can sometimes take a moment to process. Remember with the status, always add a new status. Never delete or edit an old one unless it was put there by mistake. By adding a new status, you can see a historical record of this volunteer. Finally, the admin view of the profile also allows you to impersonate a volunteer. Under Login, by clicking Log In as this user, you have the option to see exactly what the volunteer sees when they log into their account. Remember that you are impersonating the volunteer, so any changes that you make here will take effect to the volunteer's account. To end impersonation mode, click Exit Impersonation Mode in the red bar. You will then be returned to the admin view of their profile. So now that we have seen who's in our system and how we find our volunteers, let's take a look at what we will use the volunteer management system for most commonly. Member management, as we stated earlier, is the central hub in the VMS. Now, I know there are a lot of buttons, but remember, you can use the star at the top to bookmark your favorites. And in addition, on a daily basis, you will only be using about 6 of these buttons. On this webinar, we're going to discuss the Position Manager, the Intake Manager, the Hours Manager, Email, and the Query tool. The Intake Manager is the VMS tool used to manage prospective volunteers and help them become active volunteers. Now, let's jump into the Intake Manager to see a live demonstration. You can click on the person icon on the side menu to access member management. Then, select the tool that you want to use. They're in alphabetical order as well. Intake Manager will take you to a full list of all of the prospective volunteers in your system. You can also use the search bar at the top to filter. Here you can see the volunteer's name, the entry point that they're on, their status, how long they've been on the intake path, as well as their progress. A best practice is to inactivate anyone who has been on the intake path for longer than 100 days. Don't worry though, if they contact you later and let you know that they're interested in volunteering, you always have the option to reactivate them. To access a volunteer's intake path, click on the red status bar. Here you will see when a volunteer began the intake path and how far along they are on it. Remember that there are certain admin responsibilities with the intake path. The black steps must either be completed by the system, such as the application, or they must be completed by an admin. Admins should be jumping into their intake manager at least once a week to check for new volunteers who have steps that are required by an admin. Every other day is a best practice. This ensures that our volunteers are moving through their training quickly and that they are able to get into our centers and volunteering as soon as possible. To check off a staff step, you will come over to the Approve Edit step. You will change step completed to yes. You will put the date that it is completed, and you can add any comments. Click Save, and you can see the step being checked off. Again, we should be going through at least once a week and every other day, if possible, to be checking for new volunteers and for volunteers that have steps that our admins need to complete. It is our responsibility to our prospective volunteers to help assist them in completing their training. The next tool that we're going to take a look at is Hours Manager. Hours Manager is the VMS tool used to manage and approve hours that volunteers have worked. Hours Manager will also be accessed through member management. Click on the person icon on the side and go to Hours Manager. Here you can see all of the hours entries for your bubble. You can filter at the top to see only a specific center, or you can search for a specific volunteer. You can see the status of the hours as well. To approve hours, click on View, change the status to Approved, and then add any comments and click Save. If you notice the information about the hours is incorrect, you can click Edit and then update any of the information. You should only do this if the information is incorrect. Click Save to update your progress. Note that you should never delete hours unless you know for a fact they are incorrect. Additionally, at the bottom, you have the option to approve all pending hours. Make sure that you only take this step if you are positive that all of the hours you are approving are correct. Finally, remember that all hours must be approved within 60 days. If they are not approved within 60 days, they will be locked and you will no longer have the option to approve or edit them. The next step that we're going to look at is the email tool. The email tool is a useful communication feature within the VMS that is used to email volunteers. You can either contact volunteers individually or by an entire access group. As we stated earlier, access groups are groups of positions that are managed with Position Manager. Position Manager is where we will create our positions. Check the Resources tab under the VMS for a separate webinar on using Position Manager. To access the email tool, we will again go through Member Management. You can also access Member Management from your Admin tab, clicking Admin Member Management. Select the Email tool, and then you will be brought to the screen that will let you select who you want to send the email to. You can select an access group, or you can just select individual volunteers. When you know who you want the email to go to, click Continue. You will see a list of who will be receiving the email. You have the option to remove volunteers. When you're satisfied with the list, click Continue. By clicking View Hide Recipients, you can again see who will receive the email. You also have the option to send yourself a copy of the email. Under Templates, you can select templates that have been created either by you or by your colleagues under Public Templates. To save an email as a template, fill out all of the information and then click Save As, either your template for just your use or a public template for use within your bubble. Make sure that you fill out the from name and the from email, as well as the subject. Under Contact Info, you have the option to select this to be customized to the volunteer's first name or their last name. For example, this would go out to Happy 4th of July, Jack, and then the rest of the email. You also have the option to add any attachments, such as photos or flyers. By clicking Test Email, you will have a test version of this email sent to yourself before it goes out to your volunteers. Or you can click Send Email to have it sent to your recipient list. You will see that it has been successfully sent, and by clicking View Hide Recipients, you can see exactly who the email went out to. The final tool that we are going to talk about today is the Query tool. Queries are reports generated by the volunteer management system that allow you to view information about your bubble and your centers, as well as other detailed information within the VMS. The Query tool is also accessed through Member Management. So you'll go back to your account at volunteers.uso.org, go to Member Management, and select the Query tool. Here you will see all of the queries that are available to you. You can also search for a specific query. One of the most popular ones that you will use is the Volunteer Statistics query. You can search for specific queries and select the name to be taken to it. The Volunteer Statistics query gives you a snapshot of all of the volunteers who volunteered during a certain time period, as well as the number of hours that they volunteered. You can select your center, or you can select to run it for your entire bubble. You can export to either PDF or Excel format. And when you're ready, click Run. You will then be given the option to download your query and see the full report. So these are some of the most useful tools in the volunteer management system. Remember, we also have the Resources tab under volunteers.uso.org that gives you helpful information. Let's take a look at what we can find there. You'll go to your home page, and then you will click Resources, and you can see all that's available. Under Quick Reference Guides, you will find detailed step-by-step guides for many of the most popular tools in the VMS. Some of these also have videos. You can also find the USO Recognition Corner, archives of our recorded monthly VMS calls, as well as other recorded webinars. After checking all of this information, if you still have questions, you can email vmshelp@uso.org. That's vmshelp@uso.org. This email will come to Volunteer Operations. Please include detailed information about the issue that you're facing, like the volunteer's name or the calendar that you're using, and we will get back to you as soon as possible with steps on how to resolve your issue. Thank you for sitting through today's overview of the Volunteer Management System. Remember, questions, check the Resources tab, and email vmshelp@uso.org. Thank you and have a great day.